Hey guys, welcome to Raw Customs. I'm your host, Patrick Rapolo, and on this episode, I'm going to be showing you how to build a paint booth. Now, this particular paint booth is made from Masonite and some 1x2s. The reason I went with Masonite is because it's non-porous and easy to clean, and it's lightweight and is pretty rigid for building something like this. I definitely wanted to keep it light because I knew I was going to want to be able to move this around easily. And actually, my main idea is to hang it from the ceiling, get it out of the way completely when it's not in use. As far as the other materials, I did use one of those white square box fans. You can find them at Home Depot, Lowe's, or Walmart. They run right around $20. And I pick up these filters for about $1.50. I pick them up at Home Depot, and they're disposable. And you just mount them back here. For now, I'm actually duct taping it in place, but I am planning on actually building a little mount so I can just set them in there. And the rest of the materials that I used, I already had just laying around the shop and was able to use them on this project, like a power strip and some lights to light up the box and light up my project. And here's how to put it together. I started by measuring out 4 foot on the first 1x2 and then cut it to length. This is one of those build as you go projects. At this point I have an idea of what I want to build, but I didn't draw up any plans. So to start, I centered the fan with the 4 foot strip, then lined up a 1x2 from the front strip to the fan to figure out the angles for the back side piece. Then the angle marked and cut on a new piece of wood. Next, 2 of the 4 foot strips were laid out a foot apart from each other, and then my angle strip laid in between them to find the length. Next, I laid out my front 2 4 foot strips a foot apart from each other and laid my back angle strips in place, then lined up the back strip with the bottom angles. This allowed me to find the length and mark the angles for the cuts on the ends. With the back section figured out, I marked and cut the side pieces for the front edge. With the pieces for the bottom framing cut, all the pieces were glued and brad nailed together. Next, the frame was laid onto a piece of Masonite, and then the outside edges traced out, and then the section cut out. A bead of wood glue was applied to the top of the frame, and then the Masonite sheet laid in place and lined up, and then nailed in place using a brad nailer. I built 2 of these sections, one for the top and one for the bottom. Next, the strips for the walls were cut and then glued and nailed to all the corners on the bottom piece. Next, I used a stool and a box to help hold up the top, and then that was glued and nailed into place as well. I cut filler strips and glued and nailed them in place on the sides, top and bottom. Next, I lined up the fan in the center and marked the position for the back center strips. I made sure to line up the outside edge of the wood with the outside edge of the fan. With everything marked, the pieces were glued and nailed into place. Next, the bottom crossbar was lined up and nailed into place. Next, I lined the fan up in place and marked for the top crossbar. Then the top crossbar and remaining framing for the back nailed into place. A sheet of Masonite was cut to fit the back wall and stood up in place. This allowed me to trace out the section for the fan and then cut it out. With the board cut to fit, the section was glued and nailed into place. Then the remaining wall sections were cut, glued, and nailed into place as well. Once all the panels were in place, a beta caulk was applied to all the seams. To hold the fan in place, I cut 2 strips of Masonite and screwed them to the side of the frame where the fan was set. Next, I laid some foam strip on the back of the frame. With the front of the fan facing out or facing the back, it was lined up and screwed into place. At this point in time, I just have an old filter, so I just use some duct tape to hold it in place temporarily. Once I find the filters that I'm going to use, I'll actually build a frame to hold it in place. So I just happen to have 3 low voltage under the cabinet lights laying around, so I ended up using them to light the cabinet. I screwed 1 to each side and 1 to the top. Then I mounted a power strip to the top to plug in the lights and the fan so that everything would be on one switch.